middle managers at your peril. It's going to be presented by Biase. Biase is also from IQ Business. He heads up the Agile practice there called Agility at IQ. Asked him about what's interesting about him, and he tells me that he's very passionate about Juventus, the soccer team. Please help me welcome Biase.
Morning, everyone. You can hear me at the back, huh? Cool. I want you to take a moment and read this. It's a lot of text, but read it. Just checking if any of you are slow readers like I am. Waiting for you to catch up. I hope you all had an opportunity to read that. And how many of you, just show of hands, can relate to that? Or have seen this in the environment? So, from my experience, I mean, I came across this letter. It's in a book from Ken Schwaber, one of the founders of Scrum. And the book was written in 2008. But I came across it several months ago. And this sort of sparked my interest because of my recent experience at the organizations that we're working with. We mainly work and operate in large financial institutions, mainly the banks. And Agile is not so easy in these large corporates, as I'm sure you can appreciate. And when I read this, it really rings true to some of the experiences and observations that I've had within our environment. So welcome. The crux of the discussion is around the role of middle management. I know the term middle management might seem a little bit derogatory or sort of demeaning, etc. In this context, I'm talking about the level below the executives. I'm talking about portfolio managers, delivery managers, line managers, even program managers and project managers to some extent. They're responsible for delivery, right, mainly, and ensuring that the lights are on. Any middle management, if you want to stick your hand up, anyone playing this kind of role? Okay, cool. Thank you. So we're going to talk about this, but to set some context, I want to talk about sort of agile transformations and the success and failures of transformation. And kind of scary. I didn't even look at agile. I looked at any kind of large-scale transformation. And from various studies, McKinsey's, Forbes, etc., they all come up with pretty much the same thing. They say 70% of large-scale transformations fail. Okay, we're agilists, so we're a little bit more positive. We say 30% are successful. And it's a little bit easier to understand. And again, if you go deeper into it, you actually understand what are the reasons. And again, you look at the trends, and you see that the two main reasons is about lack of change management or poor execution of change management, and lack of management or buy-in from employees and stakeholders. So the two key things, right? So okay, well, this is general transformation. What about Agile? All right, so let me do some research about Agile. And I talked about, or I looked at Google, I looked at a lot of research papers, and I struggled, I struggled to find stories about failed Agile transformation, especially large scale. Again, maybe because we're positive. We don't like to tell people where we failed. But I did find one little case study, the US Department of Health. And they rewrote their website, healthcare.gov. And they call it the biggest failed Agile project ever. I think in total, they spent almost $924 million on hardware and software. That's a pretty big rewrite, eh? Must be quite an impressive website. And then if you deep dive into understanding what the case study itself, you sort of understand and unpack what are some of the reasons. And it's not just about Agile and maybe the poor adoption of Agile. It's things like vendor contracts and the way they've contracted with their vendors and things like that. Then in the beginning of the year, I read up a lot and I found a InfoQ article. And they said, well, one of the trends for 2015 is what we call the second wave of Agile adoption. Okay, so this year, or this year, we're going to focus on doing Agile properly the second time round. So if you're doing it properly the second time round, obviously the first time round didn't go so well, right? I'm making that assumption. And there's a guy called Steve Wolf that he does a lot of talks internationally about the second wave of Agile adoption, about doing it properly. So we need to understand why, right? So we get into a little bit more detail, and hopefully maybe you can't see some of those things. And I used the version 1 State of Agile survey. I'm sure most of you have seen that, very good report. And also the State of Scrum report. And try to understand some of the trends again. And if I highlight it, you might not be able to see that at the back. But things like lack of management support, things like general organization resistance to change, things like perceived loss of control or loss of management control. And you can see, obviously, being successful from that perspective is active support from management. Right? So we're starting to build a little bit of a case and context around this. And then we sort of make this perception that the number one reason for these failures and these changes are about executives and lack of senior executive buy-in and stakeholder buy-in from our executives and our sponsors. And I was having a conversation with the head of change of one of my clients, and this topic came up, and we were having a conversation. He's saying, well, what are the biggest challenges that you've seen? And I started talking about, from my experience, this middle management, this layer over here, that is mainly impacted by this change and this massive change that we have. Because it's interesting you say that, because we often, as change managers, and as we were saying, we often go through these reports and research papers. And in 2011, there was a report published by Prosky that actually, for the first time in 7 years, middle management and the resistance from middle management actually overtook the executive support or lack of executive support. And it's pretty much been there ever since. Okay. So, again, just building a case and understanding. So, think about it though. And again, through my experience, most executives buy into it. I know you might struggle to understand that. But I think they've realized, a lot of in the corporate organizations, they realize that there is an urgency for change. They need to change the way they do things. They need to change the way we work, right, to be competitive. I mean, thinking in the banking environment, their competitors, the traditional competitors of one bank versus the other, it's no longer there. We're having this convergence that is happening with retailers getting into banking and telcos getting into banking. So the traditional competition is no longer what they think it was. I think in the UK, I read an article that 3 weeks ago that a bank was launched. They got a banking license for an app. That was it. Just an app. That was the bank. Pretty cool, right? So we need to understand that these projects that take 377 days cycle time to land. I think that was what the guy said yesterday. We can't deal with that anymore. So they understand the urgency for change. Okay? But executives are strategic, right? They're visionary. They look, in the future. And they delegate the change to the management team. All right? Now think about this now, right? So I now need to execute, keep the lights on a daily basis, make sure that I'm delivering and landing projects. And now I'm also responsible for this transformation thing, this massive change management thing. Okay? And then by definition, the term management, okay, from Oxford, there's a person responsible for controlling or administering an organization or a group of staff. Okay, that's what the definition says. We control. We control people, we control the organization, we control the processes, etc., etc. But here we come along as agilists and agile coaches, and we come along with this beautiful thing called the Agile Manifesta. Quite profound, right? And I'm sure you guys all know the Agile Manifesta. I put it up there. But we come up with things like, we value the things on the left over the things on the right. We talk about the 12 principles. And I've picked out some of them. Now think about it. So things like welcoming changing requirements, business people and developers must work closely together. We promote sustainable development. So things like self-organization. We create autonomy in teams. Okay, we want teams to be self-organized. That's pretty cool. All right. We also want to limit the work in progress. So we want to limit the amount of work we take on to have sustainable pace. But we've got a book of work this big. So how do you expect me? I've got my KPIs and KPIs that will deliver on these projects. But I've still got to transform the organization into a different way of working. So it's quite conflicting. You can understand some of the resistance that come up from middle management. You basically, this perceived loss of control. You're now giving decentralized decision-making to teams where I'm used to doing that. I mean, think about the role of the project manager. It's often, we do a lot of training, and we have a lot of project managers that attend the course. And like you go through Scrum roles, and you've got a Scrum Master, and a Product Owner, and a Development team. We go, well, there's no... Where's the Project Manager? Where does it fit in over here? And they're there to respond, to execute on change, right, and to deliver. So where do they fit in this big, large corporate organization? You can't say, well, actually, you don't exist anymore. You don't have a job. Or you can become a Scrum Master. That's a normal thing, right? That's typically what happens, right? I'll tell you a story. We had a project, we had an environment, and some of my colleagues can relate. And the project manager went on leave for a month. And they were running this project waterfall. She came back, and she was told that she's a Scrum Master. No, sort of voluntold, right? You will be because you're a project manager, it makes sense for you to be a Scrum Master. I'm looking at Chris over there in the front there. So we understand this, right? And some of these themes come out, and you can read these themes. So not understanding the implication of change. Things like silver bullet syndrome, mandated change, challenging the power base. Now, I'm not going to go through all of those. We don't have enough time to go through all of those. So I picked some of the key ones. And we'll just go talk a little bit about those. So the first one is, there's a spine. So what's coming up next? Spine model, right? So the thing is around understanding and sharing the need for change. And I'm sure that most of you that are familiar with the spine model, Donnie and Kevin, I've asked them if I can use it. They said it's okay, so I'm all right about that. And they talk about needs before values, before principles, before practices, before tools. Well, here's the thing, right? Executives don't buy Agile to be Agile. They buy it to get an outcome. They want to increase their market share. They want to be more competitive. They want to increase their revenue. And they want to have happier customers at the end of the day. So that's the outcome, right? The problem is that when we get involved, and a lot of the talks have been speaking about this, we really focus on the practices and tools. Like we have Scrum boards. That's the best thing. We have boards with stickies, and we just move stickies around. And we get up every day, and we stand around, and we talk about what happened and all those kinds of things. But we often forget about this stuff, which are the values and principles. This is the mindset change, right? These are the culture thing, the impact that will impact individuals and what is in for them. So it's very important to actually understand this, right? That Agile is an enabler to get to the outcome. It's not necessarily the outcome, right? So the other thing is about mandated change. Now, most organizations that we deal with, it's fantastic because what we do is we go through Agile transformations and we say, okay, well, by June 2016, we want 75% of our projects Agile. Anybody hear that, familiar with that kind of statement? And what we'll do is we'll put it in the PDs and we'll put in the KPIs and KPIs and we'll measure people on it. And what normally happens when you measure people, incentives drives behavior, right? So unfortunately it drives sometimes the wrong behavior, okay? And all of a sudden when you on these things you tick the project, instead of being waterfall, now it's Agile and we're Agile, right? And the problem with mandated change, so the top-down change, is it's not really sustainable. People don't really buy into it because it's not sustainable, right? It's somebody telling you to do the change. You don't really understand why. I don't know if you guys follow. There's a gent called Daniel Mezick. I don't know if you follow him on Twitter and stuff. He's got this whole thing about open Agile adoption around creating sustainable change. Where he runs open space as a process to transform organizations into a more Agile way, which they run sort of monthly iterations where they get everybody in a room and actually transform. And this is about participative, I think of the word, change. All right? So think about mandated change. It's a difficult thing, right? If people tell you what to do, typically you will resist. And then this one, the same picture as the guys from yesterday. And we both can Google, I see. So the silver bullet syndrome, right? So Agile's going to fix everything, right? It's going to fix all our problems. We're going to put in Agile and immediately we're going to see results and we're going to produce working software and we're going to be happier and all that kind of thing. And that's a problem because it actually isn't. Agile does not fix all of your problems, and you guys can relate to this, right? If you got politics, if you have not enough skills in your organization, it's not going to necessarily fix that. Okay, it makes it more visible and things like that. The problem is that most management expect immediate results. So a story, working in an environment, and there's a couple of teams, and the person over there that decided to adopt Agile made a promise to the executives that the team's going to start delivering X amount of features every 3 days. That's the promise that was made. All right? The team's gone through 3 or 4 iterations. They haven't been able to deliver anything. Not because the team's not trying, but because of all the organizational constraints that are stopping them from doing it. So that's the biggest challenge, right, that you need to understand. And also, we expect if we after sprint 1 and we don't deliver anything, we get upset. And actually what happens is, if you think about it, any kind of change that we introduce into the organization will always have a natural dip in performance or productivity. It's normal. Unfortunately, people don't expect it. They expect to get over here straight away. All right? And there's always going to be a natural dip. And yes, as we become better and we don't include a lot of changes and we keep the team fixed, so we go through that process of hyper productivity, yeah, we're going to get better. We need to understand it. But how do we manage that change? And this thing about not enabling the removal of organizational impediments. So teams operate in these corporate environments. They're really good. That Scrum teams, they work in iterations, they deliver stuff, and they get stuck somewhere along the line. So things like, integrating with other waterfall teams. Big challenge, right? Because you're only as fast as your slowest team. So you've got to have a challenge there. So how can you deliver working software if you're integrating with something else, some other teams that are not? Or this business case thing that Pavel went through about 6 months or whatever to actually establish a business case. Those are things that impede teams. So we need to provide the middle management and the role of people that actually involved in the transformation with the mandate to remove these organizational impediments so that the teams can be enabled to deliver as much value as they can. Really, if you think about it, it's all about the people, right? We're no longer these factory workers. We can't expect to be factory workers. We put in work and spit out code at the end and hope everything's okay. We're not like that anymore. We're knowledge workers. We take pride in the craft. So we need to understand that we need to invest in the people. And middle management, they're also people. So we need to invest in them. And we need to understand and build this mutual trust, right? And it's kind of difficult when sort of you go away for a month and you come back and all of a sudden your roles change. That doesn't build trust for me. I don't know about you. Okay, but it's kind of difficult. So you want to build that mutual trust. You need to understand it. We need to appreciate them. Now, I'm quite a positive guy, so I always believe that everyone's got the best intent. They always want to do good stuff, right? Even though sometimes the behaviors don't show that way. But most people have good intent around what they want to do. So you need to appreciate it. It also provides an opportunity for growth for individuals, right? Including middle management, around new skills and new competence that they're going to deliver. Communicate with them. Converse with them. Get them involved. All right? Mandated change it won't work. So get them involved in the process. Enable them. Make their roles clear. Understand that as a delivery manager or as a portfolio manager, this is what is expected of you in an agile organization. And you can do various techniques to try and get and understand it. All right? And obviously involve them in the decisions. Because if they are involved in decisions, it's going to be a lot more powerful. Really what this is about, if you think about it, is what I like to call persistent and transient change management. Sounds fancy, not too fancy. It's about change management. And I'm talking about the people change side of it, right? So how do we get people to buy into this? Because that's the most important thing. And if you think about it, if we don't manage the change, and I'm sure you've maybe seen this picture, we're going to get into this trough of illusionment. And we're going to keep on wheel spinning. And like, oh, well, Agile doesn't work. It doesn't work for us. It's not great. Blame Agile for everything. We're not understanding the impact that it has on the people, on the individuals, the implications that it has on them. So if you think about it, any kind of change, and you want to change organizational behavior, all right, you need to actually answer the question, what's in it for me? You need to help individuals understand that question and answer that question. What's in it for me? All right? What is the value around what I'm doing? What is the value of Scrum in my world? All right? And the important thing is that context matters, right, obviously. So one person's need or intent is very different to somebody else. So you need to personalize it. You need to understand what they want to get out of it. All right? I reiterate to what Aslam was saying yesterday about delivery trumps transformation every time. Think about it. Because this is what I'm responsible for. I'm responsible for delivery. But you want me to transform? How is this going to help me deliver? That's the message that you want to tell these people, right? And start building that kind of trust in the process. So you have to start at an individual level and understand the impact for them and understand what you need to do. So affecting individual behavior. Now, a lot of people say behaviors can't change, but through our practices and the tools that we have in Scrum and Kanban, it allows them to understand why we're doing certain things. And those are tools that we can use. So if we change individual behavior, we could change the organizational way that hopefully at the end will achieve what our expected outcome will be, which is making more money for our shareholders, because that's why we're in business, actually. Think about it. There's the why question. So we need to grow change from an individual level, and you want to affect organizational change. But now we speak about this thing around the alignment. And I already spoken before around sort of the visionary, the CEOs, the executives that are visionary. They have the strategy in mind. They understand what the end goal is, and they have a purpose, right? And sometimes it's kind of difficult to believe in that purpose and understand what it is, because you typically can't co-create it, and sometimes you don't need to. But understand the role of executive leadership. They provide the sponsorships. This is the best, when they want to do a transformation, but people can't fund money to do the transformation. Fantastic. So we need to understand the sponsorship and understand the involvement that it is from executives. And that drive the vision. So top down and bottom up and actually sideways. So think about it. Should actually the change should be all encompassing across all levels. And think about, the long slide. I'm not doing takeaways yet. So think about the change team. And the change team, my advice and opinion is, and do not set up a waterfall approach to do an agile transformation. Create an agile change team, right? An agile change team. And have a transformation backlog. And the transformation backlog should be made up of change activities, the hard and soft stuff, as well as impediments that you want to resolve. And it should be prioritized. And your sponsor should be your product owner, right? They should be driving the direction of the change. And understand which part of the change is the most important. And you should operate in iterations. Probably 2 weeks is a bit short for these kinds of changes. So if you work on 4-week iterations, you're still trying to deliver working product at the end of those 4 weeks and deliver something of value that people can see. All right? And pick the impediments that people are as the biggest blocker, right? Because if they're doing these scrum things and they keep on getting blocked by the same thing, they're just going to get frustrated and they're just going to not buy into this anymore. So take the biggest blocker out of them and show people that that's what you've done, because that's going to provide a lot of value to the teams. So understand that. Operate in that way. So to reiterate, I mean, we speak about transformations. Any kind of transformation is going to be challenging. All right? There's going to be some challenges within any kind, especially Agile, because now we're bringing a new mindset, a new culture, and a new way of thinking in play. We need to understand that possibly the biggest resistor to this are middle management in large corporates, right? In small dev teams, it's cool. It works a lot easier. But in these large corporates, there is this thing about middle management, and you need to understand that. You need to understand that Agile is not the outcome. It's an enabler to get to the outcome. You need to also understand about the people and how to implement and adopt a persistent and transient change management approach, okay? Where you keep on answering the question and you help people answer the question, what's in it for me? And you keep on focusing on it as your key driver. And that's it. Any questions? Well,
any questions, comments?
Cool. Clear as mud.
Right, I'll take that there's no questions. Biase, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so our next session